Elf thinks he's just a little kitten, but in truth, he's a devastating monster. If you dig my recaps, don't forget to subscribe and smash that notification bell. A man wakes up in a strange cave and has no idea how he ended up there. As he ponders this, he recalls being struck down by a demon's sword and dying. Thus, this must be a reincarnation, although he has no clue how it happened or what he has become. Amidst his confusion, he accesses his system menu and discovers he has reincarnated as an S-rank behemoth creature. Such monsters are known in human literature as so perilous that an entire army is required to defeat just one. Considering that in his past life he was a warrior who swore his sword in the name of humanity's protection, the man feels a tremendous internal conflict. Nevertheless, as he approaches a lake in the cave, the behemoth looks at his reflection in the water and sees only a small kitten. At this, he lets out a scream that could be heard throughout the city. The next morning, as the sun rises on the horizon, an elf enthusiastically opens the window of her room, changes clothes to go out, but not before grabbing her two swords. Back in the cave, the kitten cannot believe that from a noble knight fighting for humanity, he has become a pet. However, he feels he might be thankful for having been granted a second life. Later, he encounters a slime, a typical E-rank creature. Being a cat, he worries the creature might try to eat him, so he accesses his menu in search of a useful skill in this moment of danger. Among a few options, he chooses Stone Howl and hits the wandering jelly squarely. Afterwards, his stomach growls, making the feline realize he hasn't eaten anything since coming back to life. Starving, he approaches the defeated slime, sniffs it for a moment, and takes a bite. To his surprise, the taste is much better than expected, and that's not all. Besides feeding, the cat discovers he is capable of stealing the skills of his prey. Amidst this, the feline's personal storage manifests and absorbs the slime's carcass, giving him the chance to save the rest of the monster for later. Meanwhile, the elf takes a boat and crosses a river to the entrance of an arena resembling the Colosseum. At the door, two guards block her path, but she shows a golden necklace that grants her entry. Returning to the kitten, he has just defeated a B-rank wyvern and steals his flying ability. Next, he encounters a C+ rank minotaur and also finishes it off, securing the skills Fireball and Ice Lance. Afterwards, he easily defeats a B-rank golem and inexplicably consumes the stone and awakens the iron body skill. Following this, his victim is a venomous snake of C rank, which gives him the Poison Fang technique. In the meantime, the elf advances until she reaches a spot where she places a magic stone that sustains the corridor's illumination. Speaking of illumination, the kitten soon finds a treasure chest shining in front of him, something he had never encountered in his entire life as a knight. Inside is a beautiful red stone, but a strange sound makes the animal think it's a trap. However, it turns out to be a teleportation crystal, which suddenly transports him elsewhere. The feline spends a few seconds not knowing where he is until a tremor occurs and he realizes he's on the back of an S-rank earth dragon. With a feminine voice, the creature sentences the cat to death for interrupting her rest, then attacks the small one with her tail. Undeterred, the cat escapes death and retaliates with Stone Howl. Obviously, the projectile hardly tickles the dragoness, but it bounces off the monster scale and knocks down some larger stones that nearly cause a collapse. Then, before being crushed by the dragoness, the cat activates his iron body and protects himself from a blow, but the force is so great that it cracks the shield and hits the user, leaving him close to death with severe bleeding. To end the fight, the dragoness throws all her weight onto the cat, but a cut occurs in her eye while the cat escapes with his wyvern wings after using his Ether Edge skill. In another corner, the elf advances down the corridor but stops and draws her two swords. This stance reminds her of a scene where she was very young and admired an older elf who had an unparalleled ability to defeat her enemies. Back to the cat, the wound in his belly sheds much blood. After a long walk, he nears the dungeon's exit but collapses on the ground from lack of strength. At that moment, he sees a shadow approaching the corridor. For that reason, he believes this is his end, but in reality, it was the elf who just stumbled upon him along the way. Concerned, she rushes to help the animal. Sometime later, he wakes up in a bed, body full of bandages. When the elf brings something for him to eat, the man reborn as a beast thinks this woman might be some kind of angel. She plays with the cat's snout while he cannot understand how she did not see that he was a monster. Nevertheless, even as days pass, the woman never stops caring for the animal with everything at her disposal, whether feeding or treating the wounds with the medications and bandages she had at home. One day, she puts out milk for the kitten and leaves to take care of something. Full of life, the creature reflects that this elf took care of him with love, health, bed, and food. Thus, he begins to see her as his master, the person who saved his life and who deserves to be protected by him forever. Therefore, to not stray too far from the one he needs to defend, the cat hurriedly descends and jumps into the boat where the elf was without anyone noticing. Later, they arrive at the same dungeon that the woman usually explores and where the animal was found. As she follows her path, he follows hers unnoticed. After all, he fears her being in a dangerous situation and having no one to turn to, especially being a woman alone in this cruel place. Further ahead, in a corridor occupied by 3 goblins, the elf casts her acceleration spell and dispatches her foes with ease. Afterward, she cuts off the monster's ears. Watching this, the cat had never seen anyone move so swiftly, although his master seemed to limit her speed due to the weight of her swords. Amid this, another goblin emerges in the room, not a typical warrior of its kind, but a mage who launches a fireball at the adversary. Realizing his master is about to become a barbecue, the cat dashes forward and pushes her to the ground. Subsequently, as he cannot reveal his true identity, the feline resorts to his trusty old Scratch to attack the goblin like a normal animal. Scratched, the monster loses balance and tumbles down the stairs. After this bizarre scene, puzzled, the elf asks what her little pet is doing there. Regardless, the two head home by late afternoon. During the journey, the kitty receives special affection inside the boat, making him feel as though he's in the warmest, most welcoming paradise imaginable. Soon, in the commercial district, they reach the Adventurers Guild, where everyone gazes at Aria at the elf's arrival and as always are charmed, wishing they were the cat she carries between her pair of water balloons. One of the men, named Lord Casman, approaches to woo the girl and asks if she has reconsidered joining his group. Once again, she declines, but the man persists in an ungentlemanly manner, promising to take good care of her. When the kitty sees the man reaching out to his master, he leaps and bites him. Lord Casman reacts, and the feline totally loses it and scratches the human's face, who also loses his cool and draws his sword against the cat. At that moment, the man charges at the cat, but the receptionist, Arnold Holzweisenegger, prevents him from behaving aggressively inside the guild. Pretending to have another commitment, Casman gives the perfect excuse to leave as quickly as possible. Then, Aria thanks her great friend Anna, as she calls Arnold. Besides her, the other adventurers also praise the receptionist's attitude. Aside from that, Anna notices that Aria is carrying a new little friend as if he were a knight in shining armor protecting his princess. Speaking of which, the elf explains that this kitty saved her twice. For that reason, she decides to name the little one Tama, having officially adopted him as a pet. Hearing this, Tama realizes he will have a permanent home and no longer needs to struggle in random caves. Subsequently, Aria hands over the goblin's ears, proving she completed her mission. Given the adventurer's results, Anna assures that Aria will soon be promoted. After settling the matter, Aria takes a moment to pet Tama, but as she ended up in a particularly sensitive spot on the animal's body, he didn't react well, causing quite a commotion. Hours later, the elf is drunk, complaining that her kitty doesn't pay attention to her. She says that if Tama doesn't correct his behavior, he won't be allowed to bathe with his master. After the scolding, Tama is indeed taken to bathe with the woman. Although he always tries to act like a noble knight and not look at the elf undressed, he encounters several obstacles along the way. In the midst of the bath, Aria asks if she will ever be strong, since a long time ago, the place where she was born was attacked by demons. However, someone named Holy Sword appeared and saved the village from danger. Since that day, Aria promised to be strong like that savior. Hearing this story, Tama knows that the Holy Sword is called Alicia, the heroine of Ragnarok. To comfort his master, he approaches and caresses her face. Another day, as they walk through the streets, Tama is impressed by how well-known Aria is, with everyone eager to speak with her. When they arrive at the guild, Anna tells the elf to leave while she can, but Lord Casman arrives in time to show a documented order from the Baron, demanding that the elf's cat be sacrificed for injuring Casman. Aria begs for mercy, then Casman proposes a duel to settle this mess. If Aria wins, the cat is spared the sentence. On the other hand, if Casman wins, the elf will become his wife. With no escape, the woman accepts the terms. At night, before the fight begins, being rank C, Casman acknowledges that his opponent is a rank below him, therefore allows her to receive outside help. That is, if anyone agrees, Aria can have someone fight alongside her. Initially, no one volunteers to help the elf until Tama shows up ready to save his master once again. Casman finds it amusing, but Anna reminds Aria that this kitty truly is a knight in shining armor. When the fight starts, Tama knows that knocking down this opponent without using his abilities is nearly impossible, but he must find a way. Aria activates her acceleration, but Casman dodges and kicks her rib with force. The elf retaliates with kunai, but the man protects himself with his durable cape. Amidst their duel, the man remarks that her hand would look much better with a kitchen knife than with that sword. In the midst of this, Tama is itching to not throw a fireball or an ice spear at this guy's forehead. Suddenly, Casman disarms Aria and starts drooling with desire, being close to having the elf as his wife. He advances for the blow that will decree victory. However, Tama blocks the sword with iron body. Then, with other howl, the cat makes the human fly away. To worsen Kazman's situation, he is struck by a stray sword right in the groin. Finally, despite the victory, now Tama must deal with the repercussions of his actions, as everyone will know he is a behemoth. Imagining that he will certainly be killed, the kitty doesn't mind, as the greatest honor for a knight is to protect his master, and this he did masterfully. However, everyone around celebrates the possibility of Tama being an elemental cat, while Anna declares Arya the victor. The next day, Tama reflects that this is really happening. He is an S-rank behemoth but was mistaken and is living as a pet cat of an elf. The next day, the kitten wakes up on his favorite pillow and snuggles up to his owner's face, but he doesn't stop there. As the elf herself asks for a little more affection, he feels encouraged to give her pointy ear a gentle lick, which elicits a strange moan from her. Startled by what happened, Tama jumps off the bed and looks back at Arya, who looks incredibly thrilled and animated as she asks the cat for more gentle nuzzles. Later, they head to Vulcan Ferreira, where they're warmly welcomed by the feline. Tama notices her tiger ears and is utterly astonished, while Vulcan approaches the kitten after having heard so much about him. Then, Arya formally introduces her pet. The blacksmith asks to hold him for a bit, so the elf places the creature where she always carries him, but this time on top of her friend. As they do, both women are charmed by the kitten's adorable antics, who thinks he must be dreaming as there's no rational explanation for everything he's experiencing. Then Vulcan asks what she can do for her partner, reminding her that she's still working on the weapon she left there. Arya explains that she needs extra durable armor for Tama, and since Vulcan loves making gear for creatures, she accepts the challenge immediately. She takes the animal's measurements to calculate the correct size. Since Tama is still growing, she plans to include adjustable magic in the garment. While the blacksmith works, Arya asks if her kitten would like to join her on an adventure. Tama promises to protect his master as his knightly vows demand. All night, Vulcan works on the animal's armor until it's ready. When Tama wears it the next day, Arya is enchanted by the cuteness of the creature, while the cat is amazed that the blacksmith managed to construct all this gear in just one day. Vulcan shares that the real problem has been Arya's swords, as she can't make them lighter at all, and they're likely to break at any moment. Arya laments this, as the blacksmith had reforged these weapons so many times before, but the elf still struggles to wield both as she'd like. Considering this, Vulcan suggests forming a temporary group, as watching Arya use the sword in combat would allow her to analyze the problem more closely and find a solution. Without delay, the team is formed, and Vulcan demonstrates the power of her hammer on the first unsuspecting goblin that shows its face in the dungeon. Terrified, the second monster attacks, but is crushed by the blacksmith in the blink of an eye. Watching the scene, Tama is impressed by the strength of this woman. Indeed, he had always heard of the extraordinary strength of the tiger people, but seeing it live is another story. Amidst this, a third goblin emerges and casts a fire spell on the Catwoman, but she easily resists and retaliates with enchanted flames, a fiery fist she uses to pierce the monster and eliminate it outright. Arya asks what that ability is, and Vulcan explains that it's an enchanted skill she derived from her knowledge of the forge, allowing her to wrap different elements around her armor. Then an orc appears down the dungeon corridor, and Vulcan says it's time for Arya to shine. The elf trembles and confesses she doesn't feel ready for this, but still gathers the courage necessary to draw her swords and go into battle. She lunges with her acceleration skill and strikes, but the orc blocks and counterattacks. Trembling for his master, Tama intervenes with his iron body and makes the monster break its axe on his magical shield. With the path clear, Arya attacks again and ends the battle, but she seems sad. Realizing this, Tama imagines his owner isn't feeling so victorious. Vulcan approaches and, after observing the fight, mentions that the long swords have thrown Arya off balance, hindering her movements. With this, the elf begs to know more, as she wants to become stronger. In this case, her friend mentions that the next floor of this dungeon has the perfect monster for that. Upon reaching it and seeing that the Catwoman was talking about the Ropers, D-level weak monsters, Arya can't hide her frustration. At the same time, Tama is concerned these creatures might ensnare his master with their tentacles in an unwanted way. Against this creature, Vulcan states that Arya will have no choice but to pay attention to her own movements, which will help her develop this skill. Thus defined, Arya rushes the first roper with acceleration, but is forced to retreat when the monster reacts with its tentacles. Watching the fight, Tama realizes his master won't be able to get close with her usual movements. Then Arya takes a hit and sees her right-hand sword knocked down. Nonetheless, she doesn't give up and continues the fight with her last weapon. In fact, she's moving much faster now, as with one less sword, the weight is significantly reduced. From this moment, the elf balances the fight and manages to attack the roper, while more efficiently dodging its tentacles. However, at one point in the battle, the monster breaks the blade of the opponent, leaving her unarmed. Then Vulcan throws a dagger and the broken blade to her friend, who wastes no time and drives both weapons into the creature, finally defeating it. Then the elf turns to the second target and charges at it with acceleration, moving even faster than before with just one sword. Seeing the roper's attack slow, Aria realizes she's found the reason for her difficulty. As she quickly approaches the enemy, she delivers several stabs and cuts off some of its tentacles, but the holes created expel a substance that nearly completely covers her. Visibly upset, Aria declares that such actions are reserved for Tama alone and charges at the roper with triple of fury. This time, she doesn't just cut all the tentacles of the creature, but also splits its body in half. Having done this, the elf names this new move Wind Blade. After the master's victory, Tama runs toward her, delighted that she had developed a skill so quickly, especially once she used equipment that truly made sense for her style. And speaking of which, since the roper's corpse was lying around, the kitten sees an opportunity to steal its abilities, so he bites the monster. At first, Tama tastes the terribly bitter flavor of that wretched creature, but at least he acquires the abilities to summon tentacles, infinite mucus spray, and crossbreeding. In the midst of this, Aria is still stabbing the monster's corpse, still angry that it did something that only Tama is allowed to do. After the battle, Aria mentions that she adopted 2 long swords in honor of the Sword Saint, but she really doesn't get along well with them. On the other hand, these short weapons fit perfectly with her style. Agreeing with the master, Tama gently strokes her face. According to Vulcan, Aria is now able to delve even deeper into this dungeon. But before she does, the blacksmith suggests the group take a break. For this, the blacksmith leads the group to a safe spot inside the cave, kept monster-free thanks to the Philosopher's Stone. Upon seeing this magical stone, Aria is thrown back to the memory of her village being attacked, but she sets that aside to clean up after the ordeal with the roper. Since there was water in that part of the dungeon, the elf takes the opportunity to have a good bath and removes her armor. Seeing this, Tama turns away immediately, for a knight must never let his passions govern his mind. By the way, the master calls her pet to bathe with her, and he ends up entering the water with the 2 women. Aria asks Vulcan about her main group's status. The blacksmith confesses that they have split up, as some have changed priorities and others have gotten pregnant. Speaking of which, the blacksmith tells her friend to keep an eye out because elemental cats can crossbreed with other creatures. And speaking of which, Tama immediately remembers that he acquired the crossbreeding ability earlier, and that had nothing to do with soccer. Vulcan adds that when Tama grows and becomes frisky, no one will be able to hold him back, and he might even steal a moment with Aria herself. Tama promises silently that he would never do that, although the elf thinks it's a wonderful idea. She asks her kitten to grow up as fast as possible so she can have a meow out with him before everyone else. Finally, the group continues their journey and encounters a C+ rank minotaur along the way. The elf is scared because of the high level of the monster, but Vulcan assures her that she will be watching the fight if necessary and that this will be her friend's final test. With that, Aria accepts the challenge and charges at the minotaur. Confident, she uses the Wind Blade, but the effect is far from expected as it barely injures the enemy. Seeing that the situation is worse than expected, Vulcan intervenes with her hammer, but the bull defends itself with its shield. Then Aria attacks several times with her new ability. Although not strong against the opponent, it wasn't fast enough to catch her. On the 3rd attack, the elf manages to hit the minotaur's eyes, causing it to hit its club against the wall and cause a collapse on Vulcan. To prevent a tragedy, Tama uses the Ether Howl to scatter the rocks and save his ally. After that, Aria advances again and pierces the minotaur's chest, ending the duel. Having done that, the woman can hardly believe she defeated a C+ rank monster. In turn, Vulcan surrenders to the power of the male cat that saved her so heroically. At night, the group returns to the guild and hands over the items collected to Anna, who is moved to see her elf friend being able to defeat such difficult enemies. Then it's time to celebrate with a good drink at the tavern. Happy with the outcome of the expedition, Vulcan invites her friends to form a definitive group, but that wasn't all. Embarrassed, she says that someone needs to keep Tama's armor in top shape. At this, the cat grabs the master's hand and touches it to the blacksmith's hand, signaling that the proposal should be accepted. Now with the team officially formed, the celebration will ramp up. By the way, Aria and Vulcan drank so much that they passed out on top of each other in bed, crushing poor Tama between them. Unable to move, the cat also can't sleep, so he listens to the two dreaming some strange things involving felines. Unbelieving what he's hearing, Tama focuses within his mind, and this leads him to his status evaluation, where there was an option to evolve to a second form. In view of this, the cat wonders if he will finally assume the form of a behemoth that everyone can recognize, as this could force his master to abandon him. On the other hand, if he can always stay as a little kitten, he can stay by Aria's side forever. The next day, Tama is still in the form of a kitten until he and his master see two men beating a defenseless little girl, accusing her of being a thief. Aria approaches the two, and they notice that on her shoulder is the elemental cat that finished off Casman so they run off without a second thought. Arya helps the little girl, asks her name and where her parents are. The girl's name is Lala, but she lowers her head when asked about her parents. Thus, the elf invites the little girl to accompany her. Along with Lala, Arya goes to a church where several children recognize the elf and are happy with her presence. Inside the church, a nun promises to take care of Lala, while Tama admires his master for caring so much about these children. For this reason, he reinforces his promise to protect the elf and everything she also fights to defend. In the late afternoon, alongside Vulcan, the duo goes to the Adventurers Guild, where Anna grants the C-rank title to Arya. However, despite the moment of joy, the receptionist shares that several disappearances have been occurring in the city of Leonard, all due to demons, and no one has ever returned to date. Upon hearing this story, Arya asks Anna everything she knows about the case. Vulcan was concerned about the elf's eagerness to resolve the situation, as it seemed far beyond what she could handle. However, Arya remained convinced that if nothing was done, more people would become victims. Seeing her friend's determination, the blacksmith offered her help for whatever was needed. Anna added that given the circumstances, the two fighters would likely be recruited by some Meg company. At that moment, a young man in a tunic entered the guild to explain what was happening. His name was Cedric Ruin, and when he revealed his face, all the adventurers recognized him as the eldest son of the Duke, a family known for managing labyrinths. Cedric greeted Vulcan after a long time and assured her and her elven companion that they would soon be comrades on the battlefield. Tama also remembered who Cedric Ruin was. Years ago, the Devil's Twilight had descended upon this world. A war known as Ragnarok was fought between men and demons. Despite the irreplaceable losses, humanity won this conflict through the efforts of a young boy known as the Grand Mage. With his vast power, the wizard was capable of annihilating endless ranks of creatures, leading his allies to victory and becoming one of the historic heroes of the battlefield. Despite the buzz around this boy, Arya questioned if their group was too small to face unknown demons and monsters. Smitten with the young man, Anna quickly assured her that Cedric could impress anyone when he wanted to. With that, she pressed herself against him passionately, prompting him to remind her that he had asked her not to do this in public. Enchanted by the romantic scene, Arya asked if the two were a couple, and Vulcan nodded affirmatively, a detail Tama didn't know how to interpret. Speaking of the protagonist, who had been quiet until then, after returning home, he noticed his master was very anxious about what was about to happen, which was understandable. After all, they would travel alongside heroes to face great dangers. The cat licked the elf's face, which she took as his attempt to cheer her up somehow. In response, the elf kissed the cat on the mouth. Caught off guard, Tama tried to focus his mind during this delicate moment. Finally, the expeditionary group set off for adventure, and the comrades introduced themselves to the strangers. The man with silver hair was Danny, while the humanoid monster was Howard. The redhead was named Keeney, and the other woman Marietta. Arya introduced Tama, and everyone was charmed by the kitten's cuteness. Without delay, Keeney and Marietta took turns carrying the animal in their body pillows. However, not everything was roses. Right at that moment of relaxation, the carriage stopped its journey due to the threat of a group of orcs on the road. Cedric asked Danny to take action, and the swordsman stepped in front of the monsters and eliminated them all without any difficulty. Vulcan inquired about the skills of this talented fighter, and Kenny explained that he didn't use any. With that, Arya understood the power of the heroes of Ragnarok, while Tama was impressed by this man tearing through orcs without using a single skill. Honestly, he couldn't wait to fight alongside these icons. When night fell, the carriage finally arrived in the village of Leonard, where the residents thanked Master Cedric for his presence. One explained that many villagers had been disappearing. A team had been sent to deal with the demons in the ruins, but none had returned. The night before, they had lost another young girl. Upon hearing this, a trigger went off in Arya, reminding her of an invasion of her old land. According to the leader of the residents, Cedric's knights were the only hope for the people of Leonard. Yet, imagining that the warriors were tired, food was offered to all of them. Without delay, the convoy went to their lodging and shared a respectable meal. Arya wanted to know why her companions had become knights, and Danny explained that his family was poor, and this was how he found to pay off his debts. Similarly, Howard had chosen this path for the same reason. Keeney needed to pay for her sick sister's medication, while Marietta became a knight to free her father from slavery. Hearing each story, Tama noticed they were all very sad motivations, and even Arya felt bad for bringing up the subject. However, the comrades were not all embarrassed by this conversation, quite the contrary, as they had paid their debts to the order and served only themselves on this journey. About this, Cedric Ruin commented that he was not made to love women and, for that reason, could not take on his family's name. Honestly, the Duke's son joined the order because he had nothing else to do. At least it was fun killing various monsters. Hearing the young man's version, the others seemed not to have enjoyed it much. After the meal, it was time for the team to bathe. While the girls took their bath, the boys heard some strange noises from them, and curiosity hit so hard that they decided to peek. However, as soon as they approached the women's bath, Tama was there to protect the maiden's decency and expel the intruders, with the other roar sending Danny and Howard back to where they came from. Seeing his companions return, Cedric tried to understand this fire they had for these things, but the truth was that he simply couldn't. After the bath, the adventurers continued their journey into the depths of the Leonard Labyrinth, where a creature observed the enemy movement within its territory. According to him, as much as they saw themselves as a group of exterminators, these people were nothing more than food served on a platter. Be that as it may, it was time to build his power and put the plan into action. After that statement, it doesn't take long before some monsters appear in the path of the invaders. A pack of rank sea werewolves approaches the warriors. Taking the front line with his enormous shield, the group's tank Howard activates a taunt skill to focus all the enemy's attention on him. This action makes it easier for the other fighters, who spread across the battlefield and take down their foes with low blows and displays of vast swordsmanship, as is the case with Cedric. Watching the carnage, Vulcan acknowledges that the Duke's son is cunning with a blade. Arya doesn't want to let the guys do all the work and steps forward to fight. Similarly, Tama assesses the humanoid wolves armed with weapons and considers using the Ether Roar, but figures it would only slightly delay the opponents. Instead, he decides to improvise with the Water Roar, which pierces the torso of one of the werewolves. After that, he repeats the move and kills 2 more foes, leaving all allies agape at this unlikely show of strength from the little creature. Meanwhile, the monster accompanying the adventurers can't understand how his wolves were killed so easily, especially by that cat, which seems to be an elemental beast. Regardless of the strength of these intruders, the labyrinth's owner cannot allow them to advance, thus he's prepared to use more weapons against them, or if necessary, to intervene personally. Returning to the heroes, everyone is enchanted with the talent of the elemental cat, as indeed they are intriguing creatures. On this, Arya admires the beast so much that she doesn't hide her desire to be overpowered by its strength and to fall victim to a thing or two from the powerful Tama. For his part, even though he feels something odd about this statement, Tama cannot give in to his desires, as Arya is still his master. Next, they invade a room which, according to Cedric Ruin, possesses an extremely oppressive aura. Thinking about this, the man orders his subordinates to stop for a moment. At this time, the lord of this labyrinth presents himself and decrees that the path of these humans ends here. He introduces himself as Beryl Astaroth, a survivor of the demons that humans once slaughtered. Danny accuses the monster of attacking Leonard for revenge, but Astaroth makes it clear that Leonard is just the first step of a much more complex and devastating project. Having said that, he summons his subordinates to battle, and a group of rank trolls present themselves for war. Impressed with the demon's ability to lead such powerful units, Cedric orders his allies to split up before they get surrounded. To disrupt the humans' plans, Astaroth casts a wall of multi-protection, isolating Tama from the rest of the group. Speaking of him, the first troll attacks precisely the elemental cat, who defends himself by tearing off the monster's arm. However, the troll's arm regenerates instantly. Soon, Tama finds himself surrounded by several creatures. Given this, Cedric's team puts the leadership of breaking the siege in their leader's hands. After all, it's their specialty to deal with such things. If that's how it is, Cedric draws his sword and emanates dark magic around it. Laughing, he charges towards 2 trolls and rips them apart, without any chance of regeneration, which removes 2 pieces from the board. Astaroth notices that this is black magic, an art that only the great mage could use during the Ragnarok War. To this, Cedric simply states it's going to be fun, or rather, fun just for him. Tama tries to retaliate with a stone roar, but the rock causes minor damage to the target, which regenerates immediately. Seeing that he's in a dire situation, the cat flees and reflects on an alternative. If he uses his ability to evolve into a second form, he could deal with these trolls in the blink of an eye, but then he wouldn't be Arya's pet anymore. To maintain his feline form, Tama uses the flame roar in such a way that even though the enemies try to regenerate, the fire continues to burn their wounds intensely. Fortunately, the strategy works and the trolls are all defeated. Astaroth can no longer bear this cat decimating his troops, but he has another problem to worry about at the moment. Vulcan appears from behind him and attacks with his hammer. The demon dodges and is targeted by an attack from Arya, but he blocks it with his dagger. The blacksmith attacks again, but Astaroth dodges and mocks the slowness of the heavy hammer. However, the purpose of the blow was to raise dust and obscure the enemy's vision. With this, Arya could take advantage and use her acceleration to gain an advantage and stab her knife into the demon's chest. He imagined that this would accomplish nothing, however. A light emanates from the elf's blade and amplifies the damage. Just before falling to the ground, Astaroth strikes with his dagger, inflicting a serious wound on the rival, more severe than a mere scratch. Everyone quickly gathers around the elf, while Tama fears the dagger might be poisoned. Still alive, Astaroth smiles and assures that the elf won't be alone, as all humanity is destined to fall when true power returns. While saying this, the demon is petrified and dissipates into the air. Meanwhile, the poison in Aria's arm spreads and Cedric is sure it's dragon poison. Therefore, Howard places the wound on his shield and everyone rushes back to the city in search of treatment. When they return to Leonard, the doctor decrees that the poisoned one has only a day and a half to live, as no one has ever been able to neutralize a dragon's toxin. Although there is a method to be tried, collecting the eye of an earth dragon. Although all members of the group are in favor of hunting the earth dragon, Cedric is against it as they don't have time for that and need to think of a quicker alternative. Amidst this, Aria screams deliriously with pain and distresses Tama, who decides to fly out the window. During his flight, he reflects on how his master is on the brink of death, just as he once was saved by her. For that reason, the behemoth is willing to do anything to repay the favor, even if it cost him his own life. With this in mind, he heads straight to the ruins where he reincarnated as an elemental cat and encounters the earth dragon he once had to face. Upon arriving in front of the enemy, Tama is asked about the reason for his return, having already fled once. Tama then declares that he will be the one to defeat the beast. In turn, the dragon laughs at the cat's audacity and assures him that he will pay for what he did to her left eye. Deep down, Tama knows he cannot defeat this enemy in his current form, so he decides to evolve once and for all into a behemoth. Guys, the source will be in the description, and also my brother and I created a manhwa channel. The link will be there along with the source. Check out the channel, and if you like it, please subscribe. See you.